Okay, can I just ask the previous speakers, Emily, Harry, Martin, Susan, to come up so you can ask them some good, challenging questions. So the better the questions, the sooner we get to lunch. Any questions? Who'd like to go first? Bob.
Hi, there was a thing on the news this morning about, I think it was fourfold amount of shutdowns, unplanned shutdowns in the North Sea. Do you think the competence or the checking of plant and equipment, is that something to do with it? And is the sharing all these unplanned shutdowns getting spread about?
Martin, would you like to? That sounds like a good question for an operator to answer.
I guess the short answer is yes, definitely, in my views. I think we have a general challenge, and again, it's an extremely wide topic. I think we tried to address that today. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with new people coming in? How do we deal with experience levels dropping? How do we deal and raise the game on some of the behavioral aspects as to the ownership and really looking after the equipment in there? And I do think a lot of it is, we have an increasing challenge as an industry, based of course of maturing assets and especially if I look at our installations, fabric maintenance, and really having robust systems where you're proactive in identifying and addressing these issues and create the space. And I think maybe a slight sidestep, when I think about competence throughout the organization, it's not only competence about being able to break the joints and do it safely when we're in shutdown mode, etc., but it's also competence about how good are we actually at planning, how good are we at making the right decisions in the company in terms of, let's say, new development projects or whatever that takes up bed space offshore, and really understanding the consequences of some of the other integrity programs in the installation. So I think we're talking about competence in all levels. That was a long answer to a short question.
I think that the other thing I'd like to add is just that I think we can always do more on sharing, Bob. You know, Catherine mentioned it, this you know, a near miss as an opportunity, and we still have a long way to go on just the effectiveness of sharing, you know, around town, and you know, there's definitely room for improvement. Any other questions? Yep, Jane.
Thank you. Whilst I personally think currency is vital, what advice does the panel have to take those guys who've been there, done it, had 15 portfolios before, and there's all these new initiatives saying you're going to do this every 2 years? I'm interested in how the industry promotes currency to the older workforce.
Do you want me to answer that one? Okay, so Rod, you go first.
I think it's about making it interesting. I think people are genuinely interested in their own discipline and personal development. Les mentioned CPD earlier on, and you know we can all keep learning. I was feeling inadequate earlier on today because I don't have an instrument background. Actually an accountant to trade, but today. And I have to record my CPD every year, and today it's 4 hours CPD, and it's been really valuable CPD, and you know, I've learned something that'll help me do my job better tomorrow, even as a consultant. Plug. So no, so I think people are genuinely interested, and if you make it easy for them to access that development and make it interesting for them, they will respond to that.
So Jane, just to add, I think it's part of just making it business as usual. And we, you know, typically a good, mature organisation has an appraisal process annually. If you build it into that as part of that, it's nothing more than what we're currently doing. You're just trying to address any management change issues. You know, you don't have to create a new portfolio every year. That would just be mad. I mean, creating it in the first place is almost mad in my eyes. But fundamentally, we need to make sure that people have the necessary skills to move forward. And that's not that difficult. But it's a simple management of change process in making sure that you review the tasks that you've had as an individual, and there's a personal responsibility in that to actually hold yourself to account as well. Yep.
Yeah, hello. With regards to MIST, it's a few years since I did mine, and as you pointed out, there were some questions which were misleading or even wrong. Is it a live document, and are you updating them, and how will this affect the statistics for people passing it the first time?
I shall take that. Yes, it is live. I think especially through the earlier stages of MIST, so the first year, I think we went through 4 different iterations of MIST in its own right. So the standard hasn't changed in the 4 years. Obviously, that's what the review is about right now. But so we're monitoring all the responses to these questions. Like on every single one, we can see the high failure rates, and then going back into those questions, finding out, are we trying to trip people up unnecessarily? Are we trying to use words that may be misleading or whatever it is? So assessing why that is that people get that wrong. And we've adjusted a lot of the questions accordingly to make sure that there is a good balance. But it's not just the questions that people get wrong. You also have to look at the ones where hardly anybody fails, because then you can have, you know, the same question and saying, do people actually get any value out of it? If nobody fails, then there is nothing to be gained. So we need to make sure that both the high end is addressed, or the high failure rates are addressed, and the low failure rate. So we've done that about 4 times in the first year to make sure it's tuned up. And then after that, we kept it fairly stable. Obviously, with the review and then with all the feedback that comes out of it, we will now be able to revisit that, taking the feedback comments on board as well. One of the other things that I maybe want to add to that as well is at the moment, feedback at the end of the course is all could be several hours after you've had a particular question. So it goes like, well, there was an ambiguous question. Or I struggled with ambiguous questions, and you go like, which question did you struggle with? So going forward, what we want to do is give people the opportunity to, at a page level and at a question level or at a content page level, make sure that people can post a comment and saying, this wording is wrong or is misleading, or I'm struggling with this and I don't see what you're saying here. So we're going to build in things that makes it easier for people to put comments at the right place and for us to then do something about it. So it's intended to be, and has always been, a live moving target, basically.
Just to add as well, the classroom level, the timescales varied from a week to change the question to 6 months. So that's something to look into as well going forward.
Okay. Any other questions? No? So I take it. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Sorry. There's somebody behind you's got the mic first.
You'll just have to wait, Jason. I've been away from I was in the safety leadership subgroup for a while, but I just wonder where the group got with the supervision. We carried out some research last year on supervision from work we did at Wood Group, and I was very interested in the work you've done, Les, on the including the behavioural part and the competency, because what we had found in the research was out of the 66 organisations, there was only 6 had a behavioural standard for supervision. So the competency of supervisors offshore is critical, right back to the Piper Alpha and major disasters. But if you don't actually specify and write down how you expect the supervisor to behave, how do we have competent supervisors? So I just want to know where the group got with the supervision, safety leadership part.
Rod, do you want to pick that up? If that's...
Yeah, I think within the workforce and engagement toolkit, there's there was a lot of work done in producing standards of behaviours for each of the levels of leadership within an organisation, and the survey tests organisations and individual responses against those behaviours, and I think now that we're getting the results back from that 4,500 results, we're starting to see some gaps emerging in terms of visibility. For example, Dave mentioned the importance of visibility. That's coming through as an initial theme, and again we can take that and start looking at how we address those gaps within leadership behaviours, not just in supervision, but in management and at all levels.
I'd just add, so the group actually, one of the challenges we face is that because every organisation has their own safety leadership programme and everybody wants to feel special, harmonisation was a real challenge, but we're tackling that through the Workforce Engagement Toolkit. Sorry, Jason.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to raise a question. In regard to competence at the design stage and integrating human factors at the design stage for offshore equipment in the next 20 years, does Step Change have a voice in regard to what the HF requirements are for, say, design system engineers, looking at the group communications, leadership in teams, looking at the systems and attributes, attitudes required to design processes and equipment for the future?
So, I guess I can answer that because I have some insight into some other parts of the industry. We don't necessarily have a voice directly as Step Change, but as an industry you do, because there's a number of design programs that ECITP and others run, and therefore, to make sure that those meet your requirements, that's where to engage. They exist out with us as a body and an organisation, but there's a number of design and development programs, and therefore, each of the companies run. That's kind of done under a standard architecture, and that's the place to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yep. Is it?
As far as design is concerned, probably the most important analysis that I'm aware of is AGC analysis. As far as designing procedures, designing systems, things like human adults are quite important.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Or is the smell of lunch and 3 hours of PowerPoint getting in the way? Okay, so, well, on that, can I just thank the panel real quick? I'd like to thank all our speakers today, human factors and competence, so you can see there's a huge alignment there. I have to thank our sponsors, Bilfinger Industrial Services. As I say, it's really important that we get sponsorship because it allows us to continue to have these events as free of charge for you guys. We will send online feedback forms, and there will be an opportunity to participate in the pilot on those forms, so please fill them in. We do listen to them. They're not just there to the happy sheet and how good the food is. We do try and address the topics and the feedback that we get. 2 important dates or 2 important times. There's a helicopter safety awareness training coming up in September. So if you still have people who have any anxiety around getting back in aircraft, please send them on those helicopter safety awareness courses. They are really, really excellent. They are delivered by helicopter operators, both by maintenance and pilots, so it's a real first-hand view of what's going on, and there's a walk around the hangar and the flight operation, so I'd encourage you to get engaged with that. The second date is the 27th of November, which is our perspective event for safety reps. We would really like to see as many safety reps as possible there, so send your safety reps along, and we'll be delighted to see them. The safety reps, the G12, actually run the day, so it's their content. We hand it over entirely to them, and it's by safety reps for safety reps, so we'd encourage your engagement. Lunch is there. Safe home, everybody. Take care.